Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Where do fish keep their money?
At the bank.
Some kind of bank.
The riverbank.
The riverbank. There we go.
Okay,
You're
dad
welcome.
joke.
What if there's
you should tell a dad
saltwater-
joke every
Yeah, every
time we
intro.
introduce
Let's not
you.
do it.
What if there were saltwater fish? There?
Not.
Okay, but hey, speaking of animals, I have like memories that have come up in my phone. And Eric, this was a picture that came up.
Okay.
Because we've known each other for a while.
Are you going to show it or just describe
No,
it?
I don't think I could find it now because
Yeah.
it came up yesterday. But
We have known each other a little while.
we've known each other a while. And I remember one time at college, you brought your little puppy to
Hermione.
Hermione, your bulldog.
Yeah.
So it made me think, just to get to know everybody a little more personally. Like, what's your favorite pet that you've ever had?
Hermione, my
I
bulldog.
thought you were going to ask what pet names we've given our spouse.
I feel like if Aaron would be okay with that, I'd be okay with you saying that. If you would like to share
I'm
that,
totally kidding.
as long as it's appropriate.
I had a supervisor once that was serious about pet names for a spouse, and
That's
anyway.
awkward.
Well, what was it?
Anyway, let's go back to
See what I
the
said?
question.
As long
He
as it's
derails
appropriate,
it,
we could share.
And then he tries to pull the train back onto the train.
not-
And
we're
now
not really-
everybody's thinking like,
we're not really
"Ooh,
a
what's
pet name people. I'm just like babe.
Do you say like, hey,
Hey,
boo
babe.
boo,
No, boo boo, no. It's just babe.
boo, babe?
Just babe.
Hey, babe.
Well,
Maybe an
my wife's
emoji.
name is Christina, and I just usually either shorten it to Tina or when I'm feeling spicy, Tino.
Ooh,
That's Latin.
I like that.
Spicy.
Yeah. No, I was thinking more of I don't even know what Tino is, but that doesn't sound like a pet name. That's weird. I'm just throwing things out there.
Speaking of your wife, she left a comment on one of our YouTube episodes recently.
Oh, yeah?
That she approved of my shirt from the Dr. Megan High-End episode.
Oh, yeah. She said she was listening, and we were talking about your shirt, and she's like, oh, now I got to go to the YouTube video to see what the shirt's all about.
Maybe I'll give it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take
And
it.
those of you who just listen, you might be missing some fun stuff every so often.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
anyways, favorite. What's one of
So
your favorite pets? Because I know how much you
wife's
love
pet
animals.
name for you, though, Alex? That's what I want to know.
I think just babe. We're just babe people.
You guys are really into Sonny and Cher.
We're big Sonny and Cher fans.
You guys always I just know
We just
the listeners know that
ruined
you
her
guys
question.
derail me, and I will not be taken down. Okay, so we are not moving on to headlines. I refuse. I will continue.
Your tenacity is just honorable.
yes.
It's very
It demands
admirable.
respect.
People want to know
My
your
favorite
soft
pet.
sides.
My favorite pet is Hermione, my bulldog. She's getting old now. She's 9 years old. Bulldogs are their life expectancy is 8 years old, and so I'm very sad that my kids and I are gonna have to go through the loss of this dog. Even though she put herself on a diet, I think, to try to live longer. She's getting skinnier than what my wife would say. She's probably got cancer or something, and that makes me feel sad. But she gets around pretty well for an old bulldog. She was the runt, so she already was fighting for her life when she was younger, and she's just holding out. And she has the worst gas ever, and I don't know who I'm going to blame that on when she's gone. Because it's a good cover story when you have a gassy dog.
That is true.
So there you go. There's my story for mine and the bulldog, my favorite pet I've had ever.
Yeah, I
Go
think
ahead.
why I went to the pet name thing was because my favorite pet's name was Baby. And it was a dog, a boxer from when we were a child. So we don't have any pets right now. Just too much for the
You just
pool.
came out, baby, baby.
That was the dog's name, Baby.
Get in the house,
The
baby.
boxer. And I remember the day that Baby died. It was a sad.
It sounds like a sad country
No,
song.
it was I remember.
The day baby died.
That does sound like a sad country song.
Shoot. Again, they're digressing. Just stick to the.
But I remember being curled up. This is probably the first time I dealt with death in my life. As a kid.
I think that's a lot of times too.
Yeah, and probably 8,
a lot of
9-year-old, and I remember finding out and just curling up on the little rug that she would
Aw.
always fall asleep on, and just weeping and sobbing, Baby.
Baby.
So maybe that's why I call my wife Babe.
Oh,
because I love her more.
You brought that full circle. I appreciate it.
Love you, babe.
Are you going to
Well,
answer,
thanks for
Jess?
asking, Eric. I don't know. I feel like I've had a lot of pets in my life. There's always been
So you're gonna ask the question and say I don't know.
no.
And you've
but
got
there's a
of
lot.
pets.
There's been a lot. I would say probably one of my favorites was we went to the Sarpy County Fair. If you're in, I don't know, Omaha, Nebraska area.
Yeah.
And there's this animal scramble where they literally open up the rodeo arena and they let all these animals run out. And if you catch an animal that's running, you get to keep it.
This is real?
It is. It is. So I caught a duck.
Sarpy County or Potawatomi?
Sarpy.
Okay.
Named. Why are you talking about
I just
Potawatomi
feel
County?
like
what if there's somebody
he's trying to
see?
throw me
I'm
under the
feeling
bus,
sassy
so-
today.
It seems
Back up,
more
back off.
Potawatomi County.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's what we do over there in Iowa. We just release all the animals once a year, and whoever catches them gets to keep it as a pet.
I'm just kidding, but
Anyways,
this is wild.
So took the duck home, and it lived at our house for a while, and then my grandparents lived on a farm, and then we took Ducky to
That's the
its
name.
name?
Ducky to my grandparents' farm, and my grandma got the Ducky, who was a girl, a little boyfriend, and literally she
Named
had like
Donald?
100 ducks.
Donald and Ducky.
She had like 100 ducks in a matter of 2 years because they just
Wow.
like bloop bloop bloop. You know what happens?
Like rabbits.
Like
but
little
they're
rabbits,
ducks.
except they're ducks.
Okay.
So Ducky
So-
was your favorite pet.
It was probably one of my favorites.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, people who listen to this podcast find out more than they probably want
Let
to
us
find
know
out
about your pets.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
Or
wanna
pet
know.
names for
Yeah.
your spouse.
Yeah, you choose what to put in the
Choose your own
comments.
adventure.
What are your
Choose what
pet
you
names
share.
for us on
Yeah.
the podcast? I
Or
call
leave me out of it.
I call that one annoying. Is what
Yeah.
they said. All right. Well, thanks, Jess, for that topic. And sorry we derailed you a little
I don't
bit.
care.
It was
It's
fun.
fine. I love you guys.
All right. Up next, we got headlines. All right, our headline comes from Omaha.com. It says, zoos hiding birds as avian flu spreads in North America. Friday, today, is, what is it, Alex?
National Zoo Lovers Day.
That's you.
Which we couldn't skip.
Yeah,
We could not skip it because we love zoo headlines around here.
we do. And what a better day than National Zoo Lovers Day. So what's this all about? The birds are getting sick and
Bird
they have
flu.
to hide them.
Nearly 23 million birds, chickens, turkeys across the United States.
Penguins?
They have not, no, but they're trying to keep penguins safe as well.
Those are some of the animals in hiding, I think.
Yeah, so
And
at
at
the
a
Lake Zoo.
McDonald's farm.
The zoos highlighted in here are in Des Moines, Toronto, Illinois. It does talk about the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo, who they feel right now, they're optimistic that it's not going to affect them. But if you do show up to the zoo on Zoo Lovers Day or another day, you might see in the near future that some of the birds in there are not going to be able to be on display because they don't want.
So they're keeping them enclosed?
Yeah, they're keeping them enclosed. They're hiding them in enclosed places. And so I would assume like the penguin exhibit, things like that are not in as much of the problem. But obviously birds,
You never know.
they fly. Birds of a feather flock together, as I once heard. So but Kansas City Zoo, like if you go there, just blank,
Yeah.
no birds. And so just be on high alert.
I think another way people may already know there's something up with the bird flu is I went to buy eggs and they were like 80 cents more expensive
Oh, really?
for a dozen.
Everything is just more expensive, so
more.
I don't even really notice when it's one thing, I think. I'm just like,
You're just like,
it's
it's
all
all-
more money now.
Yeah,
Yes.
the dollar store. People are giving them a hard time right now because I think they moved all their prices to like Dollar Tree to $1.50.
The $1.50 store.
Yeah, and then like the other dollar, like Dollar General, has like recapped and been like kind of made fun of them a little bit, and then they're going
yeah, I'm
back
trying
to
to
a
think
dollar.
what they call it. I've heard, oh, sorry guys. It's like,
I mean, at some point when you name your store the Dollar Tree, you got to know it's gonna
Inflation's going to catch up to you.
at some
Yeah.
point. The overhead is gonna get you.
But yeah. Speaking of birds, not the dollar store. You can't see the birds right now, but hopefully they're okay. It's nice to know that our zoo currently is safe. What's your favorite thing to look at the zoo? Is it birds?
Have you gone to the new
Used to be
aviary?
It used to be polar bears, but they're not there right now.
That's always sad. I don't even think they're planning on getting more.
Yeah, it's
Sad.
a tough thing. I think my favorite thing currently to look at the zoo is probably the sea lion exhibit, the new one, because they're so fun. Like the kids, put their hands up on the thing and they play and they will dance back and forth with you. And so mostly it's for the wonder that my kids like interacting with it. My youngest just loves it, and so that's typically
The otters are always fun.
They're cute.
I like the otters a lot. Monkeys, though, for me, hands down, I love monkeys. Monkeys are funny. I mean, my two
always
favorite
doing
animals
something.
in Anki, so that's monkey and donkey. But definitely love the monkeys.
Love it. We've had the same, like our whole family has the same favorite animal that lives in the aquarium. And we literally race to find Dave the octopus.
Oh, yeah.
He is our favorite. And like my kids will like step in front of other people to try to find Dave because they think he's like our special animal that lives at the zoo. I don't even know if that's his real name. That's what we call him.
Wow.
So
I saw an
Dave the
interesting
octopus.
TikTok about octopuses.
We love him.
Octopi.
Like, truly love
the other
him.
day. It's interesting.
Just
Yeah, it's weird.
Our favorite-
They're weird little creatures, but that's fun. You can discover it all at the Henry Dorley Zoo, which is not a sponsor, but that started to sound like an ad.
I thought you were going to say in the aquarium. I thought you were going to lead into our actual topic for
Yes,
today.
That's true.
You might find
There is some
catfish in the aquarium. That's true.
There are some large ones.
But that's not necessarily the catfish we're going to be talking about, but that is up next. Today we are joined by Tiffany. You're going to be talking to us about a catfishing experience. But before we jump into that, I'd love for you just to let us know a little bit about you, who you are.
Yeah. So like you said, my name is Tiffany. I am currently working as a nanny. I love children. I am a dog sitter, just all these different kinds of things. And I would actually love to share. Can I share the story of how I even ended up here today
Sure.
on the podcast, which is crazy? So about a week ago, I was sharing my story with a neighbor, and it came up. And as I got to share it, she found hope in it, which was really cool. And so I flash forward to the next day, was supposed to have a meeting at the church, and it got canceled. And I ended up in Alex's office and was like, hey, I think I have this story that I'm supposed to share to provide hope and healing to people, and not really knowing the outlet of how to share it. And he was like, we have this really cool thing called a podcast on YouTube. And I was like, no. My first is like, no, because that's a dialogue, right? And so like I can't control the questions and all of that. But it was cool because I walked away and I just knew in great peace that I could say yes. And so it was cool because then Alex after that was like, yeah, I didn't want to manipulate you or anything, but we were like totally praying for God to bring us content. And so
Alex is showing everyone how the
Spirit
sausage is made. No,
I mean, we had a hole this week.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say, hey, I didn't even want to postulate when it needed to happen, because I was like, hey, I believe that if
Lord
God lines us
provides.
up, then
Yeah.
she'll say yeah. And I didn't want there to be the extra pressure of like, oh, and it needs to be right here, right then,
Right now.
And you are the answer to prayer, and if you don't, like, you're not obeying God's will. Because sometimes we do that, and so I didn't.
we
want
don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
No, but just in Christianity,
Not on this podcast.
yeah,
We don't do
and
that.
I can't think of an exact example, but
Yeah.
I'm sure I've done that at some point in my life. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, thank you for it's a brave step. It's sometimes
It
kind of
is.
nerve wracking. So we appreciate you being willing to do that. So, like I said before, this story is about catfishing, and we had some stats that we pulled from different sources.
we should probably tell people in case, because I mentioned the word catfishing to someone earlier this week,
They didn't know what it was.
and my dad grew up just catfishing.
Well, isn't that like
fishing-
Isn't there like
fishing for
noodling?
catfish.
There's noodling,
Yes.
Yeah.
but like that's what I like grew up doing, is fishing for catfish.
Yeah.
And so
Well, that's why she's here, right? That's what I thought we were talking about.
surprise.
surprised. So we should probably mention that.
Yeah.
I mean,
What
there
is catfishing?
luring, like catfishing, but so when people use their fake identity, create a fake identity to lure you into a relationship, like business relationships, sometimes romance, obviously with the invention of the internet.
Yeah, that's it.
There it is.
It's grown in I think the ease of being able to do that kind of stuff, and we've had shows like MTV called Catfished that have really.
Yeah, I think that was my first introduction to, because I remember hearing the show advertised and I had no idea what that was about.
Yeah.
And when I watched it, it was not what I thought it was about.
Yeah.
But,
It wasn't about fishing for
Yeah,
catfish.
Because there are shows about that where they like
There
stick
is.
their entire arm into
Yeah.
like a catfish's mouth.
Just
But
a
anyway,
different channel.
We're digressing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, here's some stats about catfishing. Romance scams reported to FTC in 2020 resulted in a total of $304 million in losses.
Jeez.
Approximately 35% of the victims of catfishing experience psychological consequences. Among the main reasons for catfishing are profit, revenge, boredom, and curiosity. When it comes to gender, 64% of catfishers are women. 35% of catfishers are catfishing for profit. Catfishers look for their victims on social media networks, online dating sites, chat applications, etc. According to catfishing records, 83% of Facebook profiles are fake, and 53% of Americans lie on their dating profiles.
Which
That's
is
over half.
Manipulating and doing a little bit of faking an identity online for sure. So.
Right.
When I was pulling up those statistics, I was just shocked by a few of those, like that 64% are women. And even I hadn't even thought about the profit, kind of way. Because the Catfish show on MTV is usually around relationships and people trying to manipulate in relationships for that kind of stuff. But I mean, I got an email yesterday from my boss trying to get some money from me, and it wasn't them.
Yeah. You didn't buy Mark Ashton any gift cards?
It was actually Jed.
Oh,
so
really?
Jed's made it because
okay.
he has somebody catfishing for
Wow.
him.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So no.
So tell us, give us kind of the beginning of the story. What happened? Give us a little background.
Yeah, so I'll kind of just let you enter into my life. So I grew up in a very small town of like 800 or so. And so everybody that you go to school with, you really start in preschool and you go clear through. But when I was 16, a girl had moved to our town, and for the purposes of this podcast, I'm just going to call her Kelsey. And so Kelsey had moved to our town and just kind of, it's a small class. So there's like 42 people in my class. So you're kind of interacting a lot, and got to know her a little bit. When I was 17, we became best friends eventually. And when I was 17, she was like, hey, I really want to introduce you to my ex-boyfriend. His name is Brandon, and the story was, I really want to get back together with him, was like her story that she was telling me. So as her best friend, she's like, hey, can you put a good word in for me? And I was like, absolutely. What do I need to do? And
What are best friends for?
Right. I'm here for you. Also, she watched me go through a breakup when I was 16, and really the guy was a couple years older than me and just really stood up for me, and I felt like spoke truth over me. And so, of course, I wanted to do that for her. So she introduces me to this guy, and it's through email because he's a couple years older. So he had graduated and he was in the military, was the story. So he was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. And so she just kind of wanted to connect before he left. And I'm trying to look back and remember, like, oh, that was just so fascinating because it was, getting to know him a little bit, but then putting in some good words for her as well. And so we started talking, and back then it wasn't like, I didn't even have an iPhone. And so it was literally just over email or MSN Messenger. And so we talked over email a little bit, but it was like maybe once a week. And anyways, the story started to unfold where Kelsey was a year older than me. And so she eventually graduated and left. Feelings obviously emerged between Brandon and I eventually. And then my freshman year of college, so it started when I was 17. When I was 19, I had found out that he never existed, and it was Kelsey the entire time. So I know there's like a lot in between, and I'm going to leave a lot of space for questions.
Yeah. So that's a a good amount of time.
2 years or
yes.
more.
So what like lured you into like having this kind of relationship for 2 years over email? Like how, like, you know, I think people are like, how does a relationship even get deep over email? Like what kind of things were you sharing?
Yeah.
All those kinds of things that made it a substantive relationship in your life.
Yeah. So I think I've looked back on this a lot. And first of all, it's so interesting if you look at the details. So she had spent quite a few time, like literally creating this guy of my dreams. So when you're best friends with someone, you're sharing like, these are the kind of guys that I'm attracted to. Like, this is what I love. And these are the movies I'm watching. And this is what I want in my future. And so she was brilliant in that way. Like, I'm not going to disguise that. This girl was so smart. And so had created this man that basically was my dream. And we were like talking off and on, but I think what made it last so long is I had some friends that they would speak up. They would say, hey, I think something's off. And the one thing I always clung to was a best friend doesn't do that. Like, maybe I grew up on too much Disney Channel. I don't know. But like, I had been friends with Kelsey for almost a year and a half before she introduced me to Brandon. And so I was like, yeah, I understand things might seem off or this might be unsafe, but like, I know her and she wouldn't do that. Like, people don't do that to other people, and was my belief and my perception. But it's so interesting because it's so crazy. People couldn't prove anything. And so people had tried, like there had been pictures that were shared back and forth. There's always a story. And so it was like about the time that I would think that maybe like, oh, maybe this is off, then something traumatic really happened in Brandon's life. So because he was in the military, like the first thing I remember happening is he had gotten injured in war. And so keep in mind, when we started talking, it was just like random, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, because he was supposedly deployed. But then when something happens that's traumatic, you just like forget questioning what you maybe were questioning, and you're fully present with this person that's hurting. And so that was one of the instances. And then you kind of get through that. And then it was like his mom had breast cancer and then was suffering, and I had talked to his mom over like MSN Messenger, which is crazy. And so then it was like she passed away, and then it was like ministering in that moment and being present in that moment. And then he found out that he had a child. So y'all, the stories
like
are
a string of.
It was like, but it was so emotionally manipulative in so many ways. And so I just kept getting sucked in. And there's also a parallel relationship that I don't have time to get into on the podcast, but you can probably hear when someone does something like this, you have to wonder if it was like abusive. And there were several layers of abuse that on the side that were unfolding in my relationship with Kelsey that I just was so sucked in that I felt like I couldn't get out. And so if I'm being honest, Brandon was also an outlet for me of safety, of like, man, my life is so hard. And if I can just hold on to someone who is going to come and save me, I think is honestly at the core. I was 17 at the time, you know, and so I was like, this man is going to show up and I'm going to get married and everything's going to be okay. And I'm going to get out of this like toxic cycle. And it just didn't work. If I was getting pushed down by Brandon, Kelsey was actually saving me. So she was like the friend that was like, I'm so sorry he's a jerk, you know, like I'm so sorry he did that to you and I'm going to stand up for you. And then if it wasn't Kelsey, and then if like Kelsey was being rude, then Brandon was the one that was like, babe, I love you. Like just trying to like, yeah, be there for me and pick me back up. And then you come to find out the person that was knocking you down and picking you up is one and the same. So there's a lot there. That's kind of like, I think, why it unfolded for so long.
And after it lasted for so long, when did you start seeing or recognizing red flags? And like, this is really, there really is something off.
Yeah. So you know what's fascinating to me is I look back on my emails. So I had a separate email account. I had filed a police report after all this happened. And the police were like, get a different phone number, get a different email, get like block everything, change your social media, all of that. Nothing like legally was or illegal was committed because there wasn't any money exchange. So to like hear those statistics and
No
stuff.
tattoos.
No.
Oh,
None of that. I mean, there were pictures, but like they weren't nude, and so that's not illegal. You know, so it's just like, oh my goodness. But I had emails where I would say, hey, people are saying that you're like not real, or people are saying something is off. Like, so I was going to this person to seek truth, and I was being lied to over and over again. And so for every single story or everything I brought up of like, this doesn't feel right, because you see red flags. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I would talk to Kelsey or I talked to Brandon, and there was a story for everything. But eventually, I mean, if you lie enough, it's gonna come out. Like, you can't live your life an entire lie, right? And so I think it was when I went to college and, just God had given me some really sweet friends that spoke a lot of truth over me, which I'll share later on. But a lot of red flags, for sure.
So the whole time you were in a relationship with Brandon through this email, Kelsey was right there in your, like, as a friend as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is fascinating. I was asking my mom recently of just like, hey, did you expect, like you kind of watched me walk through this, which we'll get to that later, of like how hard it is to watch someone walk through this. Did you suspect anything? And she was like, no. Like Kelsey was like so well known in our town. Like, I mean, she was on National Honor Society, like in every sport. She did choir. Like, she just was I would say she was popular, funny as all get out. And so it's just very charismatic. And so when you see somebody like that, I think you even question, something feels off. But you can't name it. It's so hard. Yeah.
And so did that, I mean, maybe we can get into this later, but also like when you realized what was going on, was that something that you cut ties immediately, or was it like
confronted?
Yeah. So my breaking point, I think, was my senior year of college. And I still like respond in my body. And so, which is very real through the healing journey. But I remember the last time I saw her. So things in college start to unfold where I said like the lies, eventually you find cracks in them. And so the story was Brandon was going to move to Omaha, which is where I was going to college at the time. And he was looking at houses and all of these things. And this had been the same story. Like, I asked my best friend in college, like, when she walked me through this, if she saw any red flags. And she's like, Tiff, they were all over the place. Like, first of all, this guy was always supposed to show up for you, and he never did. And honestly, I look back on those moments when you're in high school and you're like expecting someone to like show up, and they talk about this perfect date, and then they just don't show up, and some people refer to that as like, ghosting, but I mean, I still talk to him. And so eventually she had made up over the course of the time that I had talked to her, 15 to 18 people. And so I had talked to some of these people.
She made accounts for all these people?
Yeah.
Like different email or MSN accounts?
Occasionally some of them had actual accounts. Some of them I talked to through Brandon. So my friend in college, she had talked to Brandon. I had friends in high school that had talked to Brandon. So it wasn't just like me just talking to him. Like other people were talking to him. So like other people like knew about him.
Okay.
But she had sent he started modeling. And so she was sending,
of course he did.
Yeah, right? So he he sent this picture of modeling, and my friend is like flipping through a magazine. And I was like, oh my God, that's the same picture as Brandon, And so then I like bring it up, and some story comes behind it of like, oh yeah, like when you model, you sell your portraits, all this kind of stuff. I don't know. It was weird. So I hit this point where I think I started feeling it, and I'm like, I'm going to find out. And this has been the course of so many of my friends in my life. I'm going to prove this girl. Like, we know something's off. Nobody could prove it. And the last time I was with her, she lived out of state, so I was spending the night, and I remember she had left to go to bed, and I was sleeping in the living room, and I like faked sleeping, and the computer was on the coffee table, and I thought like, I'm going to find all of this out. Like, I'm going to open the computer. And so I fake sleep, and she like walks away, and I'm like trying to like get ready. And then I hear her door blow open, and she comes and like grabs her computer. And so I was like, ugh. So like everything I had tried. So finally I called up a friend, y'all, finals week of freshman year, which school's everything to me, but he dropped it, man. He dropped he dropped his finals to help me. And I said, I think something's off and I can't prove this. Can you help me? Like, will you help me? And I'd sent him some emails randomly. I made sure to pull from different times. So part of Brandon's story was he was recruiting for a while. So he was like all over the nation, traveling overseas in Afghanistan, obviously. And all the emails traced to her. And so my friend at that, my best friend in college, her name was Ashley. At that time, she's like, Tiff, I still remember that day, clear as day. Like, you had gotten the phone call and you just fell to the ground. Like, you were devastated. And she watched me go through that. And the first thing I did fall to the ground. I remember the weight of it all, of like, how did that just happen? Like, what I didn't want to be true was true. And then I picked up the phone and I called Kelsey, like I always do. And I said, do you have something to tell me? And she was like, what? And I was like, I traced all of these emails and they all trace back to your apartment. Like, can you tell me about that? And she, like, you cut her off. Like, she had no time to come up with anything. And I think she had said something like, oh, I'm using this router and his stuff is like routing through my apartment. And it was just this bizarre story that I was like, okay, like, that doesn't even make sense, like, whatsoever. She gets off the phone and I'm getting emails from Brandon right away. Babe, don't believe your friends. Like, I love you and I found this house in Omaha and I'm going to come and I'm going to be with you. Like, your friends are lying to you. And Kelsey was denying it. Still to this day would probably deny it. And so, yeah, I found out. I went straight to her and was still denied. But I knew at that point in time, when you have the facts in front of you and somebody's still telling you, that's not true, don't believe your friends. But you're like, dude, like, I see the truth in front of my eyes. Like, I can't deny that anymore. So.
Yeah, I know that. So during that time, especially maybe if someone's listening now, like college years, MSM was like the thing. That's like where I communicated with everybody, you know? So I think for some people that are like, well, why aren't you FaceTiming? Why aren't you doing all these things? Like, that was just the reality of like how I communicated with like friends in my dorm rooms, people all the time. A lot of relationships were built that way. Yeah. I remember my freshman year of college, I was leading a high school boys group of students. And they thought it'd be funny. It was me and then a single gal who was also leading, and we were both single at the time. So the like eHarmony had just come out, and one of my roommates he was older. He had just found a spouse via eHarmony. So they're like, "Oh, it would be so funny if you and this girl are compatible. We think you are. You both should do eHarmony, set up a profile, and we'll see if you're compatible." I mean, because high schoolers, they love that kind of stuff, right? Like the boys in the group, the girls in my group. I mean, the boys in my group, the girls in her group. So they did. They set this up, and we weren't compatible. She's married happily, and I'm married happily right now. And so we set it up, and I forgot about it. And I'm in college. I'm playing high profile basketball at Grace University at the time. R.I.P. And like Thursday, like, so this had happened like the spring of my freshman year, my sophomore year basketball season. Like on a Thursday, the guys, I'm still their leader. They're like, "Hey, Kylie's coming to your game." I'm like, "Who's Kylie?" They had been talking like to this girl from Florida as me, like they had met from eHarmony, and she was like, I had to call this gal. They're like, I mean, they just rationally couldn't think of it. They just thought it was kind of fun, entertainment. Yeah. They're not thinking about somebody else's feelings about this woman who had bought a plane ticket and like all of it. Like, I'm thinking, why is she's coming to my game? And I've never talked to her, but they were actually talking somewhat on the phone because they were, their voices had changed and they had this entire thing. I had to call this girl in Florida. Like, I'll never forget. Like, I made them sit there and listen, like, to me call and talk to their parents, obviously, because this is a big deal. Yeah. And like their parents ended up paying for her plane ticket. One of the boys had been paying for an eHarmony account, like had kept it going for like 6 months. Wow. And so that's when I learned really like that there's entertainment factors behind it. There's people that are, this gal had some hurt in her life, and that's what led her to, even take that risk. And, I was such an awesome guy, not actually me, but like they had paid painted this perfect
Yeah.
guy picture, which was based on my profile and even current pictures of me, like all this stuff. And so it can be a painful thing, isolating. And so that story just reminds me of that happening and how devastating it can be and how that can happen pretty easily in someone's life. And it's easy for us, I guess, on this end to be like, that's so dumb. Like I would have caught all these red flags, out there. And people that don't understand that situation. So what are some of the things that you would say to other people who are in a situation like that or have dealt with a situation like that helps them maybe find healing, like that this is maybe not healing, but people that have been catfished or maybe thinking they come across this on YouTube and they're like, am I being catfished? How do I start to like find my way out of this and discover that that's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to answer that. Jess, did you have a question too?
I can save it.
Okay.
I'm just like feeling like the weight of like you're telling the story about this girl, and like I'm feeling like I can empathize with your emotions because it's like devastation.
Yeah.
And like someone died, and it's like this betrayal that not everyone is going to be able to relate with.
Yeah.
But like you're having this experience, it's like intense emotional, like it's grief.
Yeah.
But there's like so many layers to it.
Yeah, and I think my perspective is it's so unique, and every catfish story like is so unique. Like I had this girl that I didn't go somewhere randomly online to do it, and we didn't date the whole like 2 years or whatever, if you want to call it dating. Like we didn't do that. It just is more of like a pen pal. And for you to say this girl, like in your situation, Alex, that she was going through a lot and this was an outlet for her. Like I look back on my life and I'm like, dude, I was so vulnerable, and it makes sense to me why I felt safe having a relationship like over and behind the computer screen, right? And yeah. So as far as like healing goes, is that the question you had asked?
Well, I guess just for somebody that's dealing with this, so like how do
Or potentially
dealing with this, or maybe they're struggling with this right now, and I'm wondering, is this actually happening? How do we offer grace to maybe people that have been through situations like this? How did people offer grace to you?
Yeah, so that's a really cool part of my story, which I love. First of all, the grace in the situation is I can only imagine how exhausting it is to walk with somebody through this. Like Ash had said, Tiff, it was defeating to watch you go through this. And as someone who I know she loved me and she would try, she's like, I just couldn't prove it, but like I knew something was off. And she had actually met Kelsey, and Kelsey had tried to be like, because Kelsey was very isolating, was like, your friend hates me. I'm like, what? She doesn't even know you. So I think that was the first time that I was like, no. Like you can't like peg me against this person that you don't know. But what worked really well is I was saying, I know it's got to be exhausting. So I had friends in high school that were walking with me and trying to speak truth. And it just like, I ended up graduating, leaving town, and I was still in this relationship. And then I moved to college, and like God brought new people to say like, hey, this isn't okay. So if you're walking with someone, I want you to hear that if it is too heavy for you to keep walking with this person, like it is okay to surrender them in grace and to trust that God's going to bring someone else to walk with them. And I think what worked well is safety in this situation is so important. And so what really changed my life in college is Ash would ask questions. So even if she didn't agree, like even if she's like, yeah, this is slightly off, she would still say like, what do you like about this guy? Like she would like invite me to share, which was very safe for me and built a lot of trust, whether she believed it or not. And because of the questions, she would say like, hey, do you think that he's coming, or do you think this? Whereas I think in college or in high school, I was more defensive because it was like people trying to prove. No, I'm going to prove to you that this girl is like making this all up. And I just was like so defensive about it. So I think speaking truth, I had friends that said in college, like, Tiff, like you deserve better. Like you deserve a man that's going to show up for you. And also like a best friend doesn't make you cry until your eyes swell up. Like that's like not a best friend. And just the kinds of things that she spoke over me to lead me to believe that I needed her in my life. And also if I like stepped away from her, that she would literally commit suicide is what I had thought and come to believe. So there's just so much enmeshment. So I think walking with someone, asking them questions, whether you agree or believe with believe it or not, you know, and just loving them in word and action. So I had friends say like, you deserve better. And I also had friends say like, they didn't say it, but they showed me. They showed me what it was like to like laugh again and have fun and go out. And I mean, Brandon and I like weren't always dating the entire time in college either. And so guys that like took me out on dates, and I was like, moved. What? Like a guy shows up and takes you out. Mind blowing.
Well, it seems like there's like, I'm not clinically going to diagnose anybody, but Stockholm syndrome happening here, right? Where there's like, you're the victim of somebody that's a perpetrator to you, but they have convinced you that you are relying on them as like, it's a classic like hostage situation where you become dependent on your hostage, and now you're fighting for your hostage instead of against them, in that Stockholm syndrome. And so it seems like that, like you have become so enmeshed in this, and people that have gone through that into the situation that you're like all of a sudden defending this person that is, you're the victim, but now you have been led to think they're the victim. And so now you're defending them because they're the victim and everybody's out to get them. And that's classic, you know, what people do in those kinds of situations. And it's sad. So.
Yeah. Can I ask if once you figured everything out, what was the process like of, okay, now I have to tell my mom?
Oh man.
Like, do I go back and like find my friends from high school?
Yeah.
So and talk to them? Like, what was that like?
Timing, y'all. So Kelsey got me tickets to my dream concert. Like, if anybody knows Paramore, I loved Paramore, you know. She got me tickets to this dream concert. I'm like, yes, I'm going to go. And then I find all of his stuff out. And so I obviously was like, I'm not going to the concert anymore. The first thing Kelsey does is, she's brilliant. She runs ahead of me and she reaches out to my friends that are still in high school. And the story is, Tiff isn't going to the concert anymore. People are like, dude, that's like her dream. Like, why would she not go? Also, you guys are best friends. Kelsey's like, she thinks I made up Brandon, which is absolutely crazy. I would never do anything like that. So she had like went and told, I wasn't ready to tell anyone. She'd already beat me to it. And she not only beat me to it, she beat me to it by beating me down and blaming me and saying like, Tiffany is the one that like accused. By God's grace, I grew up in that town, and there are some people that like did believe her. And there were other people that said like, no, I know Tiff, like she wouldn't do that. And I really thank God for those people that like knew me, you know, when somebody tried to like go out ahead and all of that. It was hard on my parents, I think, for sure, because they watched it unfold, and they quickly became unsafe to me because they were like, we don't want this happening. They tried to take away my computer. That was like what they'd done. I was really rebellious, if I'm being honest, too. Like, I'm a teenager. Like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to find a way around it. Oh, Lord. And then the first person I called was my brother, Corey, and told him. And he sat on the phone, and he said, I'm so sorry. And I said, I just lost my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, which are two, like, really powerful times in your life. And I just lost them. And so I think telling people... I really didn't tell a lot of people, at least face to face. It's devastating to face a small town too, and like everybody knows your stuff before you've even. And
I feel like probably embarrassing to some extent, or like some shame,
I felt
or lots of shame.
So stupid.
Yeah,
I felt like, how did this happen? And I was just like straight A student, high GPA, like even in college, like, and I still felt just so stupid, which I think is normal for a lot of victims of this too. And what I've read up on is actually like, you're brilliant. And so if you're going through something like this right now, I just want to tell you, like, man, you're so smart, and I'm so sorry. Because that's usually what happens is people that are high empathy, or that can be deceived easily. And so I shared with a few people, but my coping skills were like, I was devastated. So I ran to a lot of different things. Yeah.
So what was it like for you walking out of that situation? And, you know, have you found closure now, do you think? Have you found healing, or is it still kind of an ongoing process?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely ongoing. And I learned a lot about the difference between like forgiveness and reconciliation, which if people are listening and aren't believers, they're more like churchy terms, I guess. But a huge part I have been sharing with some friends. This was probably the lowest point in my entire life, and a point in my life that breathed the most shame. And honestly, when I got out of it, I worked like crazy. Like I just was like, how can I like control my life, right? Mm-hmm. So I picked up extra hours, and at the job I was working at, I read a bunch of books. Like, let me get lost in fiction and fantasy because my world is falling apart. I had developed an eating disorder, so it's just like I was trying to grasp everything for control, and I had hit this point where I was like, I can't. I moved back to Omaha for my sophomore year of college, and I had hit the ground. Like literally, I was on my floor in my dorm room, and I was like, I can't live anymore. Like, first of all, how do you trust people? Like, how do you trust yourself? And if this is the world that I'm living in, then why should I be living? Like, why would I want to live for that, like, brokenness? And so I grew up in the church. I had left when I went to college, but I remember being on my floor and just saying, God, if you're real, like, I can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I don't want to. And how I explain it is like in that moment, man, this peace came over me, and I was able to get up off my dorm room floor. And I remember I called my mom and I said, I'm not okay. And she just said, you have to get help, Tiff, and do what you need to do. And I opened my door, and my best friend was standing there, Ashley. And I said, Ash, I'm not okay. And she just held me while I cried. But I share that to say, like, man, giving my life to Christ, I really believe is what saved me. I would not have made it out. And so I had the peace to keep walking forward. And I'd found a Christian counselor, and she said, Tiff, like, go back to church. And that was the first time I ever heard the voice of God. Is the pastor was speaking. I felt so alone and isolated at this time. Mm-hmm. Nobody else that I knew had gone through something like this. And I was sitting in the back of the church pew, and the scripture is Matthew 28:20. And at the very end of it, the Lord says, and I am with you always. I am with you always. And so I think I look back to that and said, like, I felt alone, and God spoke, no, you're not. I'm with you. And so the healing journey, it's still unfolding, where I said there's parallels of different abuse that also happened in a friendship. Like, this was like 10, 12 years ago. I'm still processing that. I mean, your skin is stained with the touch in ways that, like, maybe you didn't want. Your mind is wrecked. What is truth? What is reality? Is like what I'm feeling. Your body is so disconnected and disassociated. And so just the process of welcoming my body back and my feelings. My senior year of college was when I started, like, processing emotions. I was like, I don't even know how to feel. Like, we were going through, like, the feelings wheel of, like, what is this emotion? So, it is definitely unfolding, but inviting people into that journey has been really beautiful too. Made it worth it. So,
yeah. So if you're thinking of, other people that have experienced this, and I think you shared some of that right there. I mean, your relationship with Christ obviously brought you out of that, but somebody else that's just feeling it, because I think you've alluded to shame being a big part of it. Maybe there's somebody that they're feeling this, or like, where do I go? What are some steps I begin to even take? People are going to think I'm crazy. This is such a wild story. Like all of those things that obviously an enemy that would want us trapped inside of those emotions and to not find freedom would do. And the people that do this are brilliant. I mean, that's how there's millions of dollars given away. It's not just relationship manipulation, but it's people that play on, heartstrings in a lot of ways. And like you said, people, you're one of the most empathetic people I know. And so they prey on good people. These aren't just like stupid people that are just giving money away or like giving their life away or caring for people in the middle of these things. So what would you say to somebody that's just like experiencing it, afraid to come out and have conversations? What are some of the steps that you would encourage them to take, encouragements you would give to them right now?
Yeah. Men don't do it alone, right? Speak up. And here's what I believe to be true. How we were designed is, I think we innately know when someone is safe and when they're not. And I would say wherever you're at in this situation, I believe there's someone that's safe, that's around you, that's in your path, whether that's a stranger or whether that's someone that you're just starting to know. But I just would encourage, like, to speak up, right? And that person that is safe, they're going to listen, and they're going to walk with you. And I would say get help. That was probably like the greatest thing I did. Was I knew it was bad, and I did cognitive behavioral therapy and learned how to process through all of that. But yeah, to not go at it alone. And I believe there's got to be someone in your life, just one person, speak up. And to those people that they speak up to, please listen. Mm-hmm. Listen without judgment and just love, and be willing to feel like you guys have been willing to feel alongside of me and say, like, that is devastating. And man, when you're catfished and you have something that's going on, you create these dreams. Or like my friend that I shared with a week ago said, she had experienced something similar and was like, there's fantasies. Like, can you even like grieve this because it didn't even happen? So then there's like that mind game. And I'm like, no, like your brain literally, like it was real for you. So like Brandon's like mom had died. I had talked to her. That was a death to me, even though it didn't exist. And so you learn to like, you grieve those things, you grieve those dreams, you grieve all of that because it mattered to you. And there's no shame in that. That's actually beautiful that you can feel and that you can love at that depth and that you can grieve. You're worthy of grieving. And so speak up and get help. I don't know if there's any resources per se, but just to hear the stats is like, whew, a lot more people than I thought were even going through this. I haven't even watched the show because it's like would probably be so triggering. I just like.
Well, and it's one of those things where I think when people just hear it, they make assumptions on what the situation was, what the circumstances were. But hearing you share this story even brings to mind in any relationship, whether, that is even real, there are always expectations. And I think so many times we form those expectations and we write those stories for our future. If someone's is pregnant, they write the story for their child. They write, and maybe they lose that child. But I think there's so many parallels that we can draw to help people understand what is happening and just because it's not even fantasy. It's that expectation of what the future is going to hold. And I think to lose that is devastating and heartbreaking and grievable. And that shouldn't be something we should make people feel ashamed about. So, I think it's really powerful. Anybody else have any, we have Tiffany here. Any other last questions or anything that we want to?
No, I just was. If this has evoked fear in somebody, like I read all those stats or whatever. Like, should I stay away from the internet, or are there just practical tips that we could give people on, like, hey, here's just some ways, like if you're sensing something like this is happening, or ways to like create barriers or safety. Like I know even we've had people message the church and like start commenting on things, and then like we Google their picture, like with a reverse picture search, and we've seen like, oh no, this is like a totally random person not attached to their, and it's hard to know the motivations behind all of that sometimes. And you're like, this is just weird, but it happens like so much. And so what are some, I don't know, practicals you would give people on just maybe
make them send you a photo with a current newspaper
or date,
and their name, something.
I mean, because this happens to older people, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's also the thing that was interesting. So one of my friends in high school called this out. Kelsey had a boyfriend she'd made up as well, also in the military. He died. His name was Craig. And so but my friend in high school, she was like, Tiff, this picture is of me and Kelsey. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she shows me the original picture, and Kelsey had like photoshopped it and then put this other random guy who I don't even know. Like I spent all this time trying to Google all these, like, how do you figure this out? Like slap the picture. And so it's so true. Like, how do you keep yourself safe when there's so many frauds out there? And for me, it's like, what is truth? Like, how do I trust people? Like even seeing you in the flesh, like to have someone who I was friends with for a year and a half that studied me, which that's how it feels, is that she studied me. She intentionally asked questions of my dreams, of the kind of man I wanted, and then she created it. Yeah. She not only did that, this is brilliant of her, by the way, too, is she was very attentive to the shows I was watching. And it wasn't until college I found out there's like a show called One Tree Hill that I hadn't watched in high school, but she really loved. And so I learned after the fact, as I started watching the show, I was like, wait a second, like those names are familiar to me. This story is familiar to me. She was polling from like culture and TV shows to make up this story. And so I just think being in community, guys, I think we cannot live life in isolation, and we've got to be like, it's not gossiping if you speak up to someone that you trust, that you feel safe with, and say, I just want to process this. Like the moment we think that we can do something on our own is like a danger point. And so if there is fear, I would never want anybody to operate out of that. Like I realize as I've shared my story with a few, it's like they're terrified. And I don't have any social media. I don't ever want to date online. So if like I probably have even some fear that I'm still working through, you know, but just be wise and like, talking up to people and having people be real with each other. If you sense something is off, say it with grace.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, like there's a show right now. I think my wife told me about it called Circle or something like that.
The Circle.
And it's literally, isn't it literally about like teaching you how to like it's people catfishing one another from what I have seen.
They could be
create
real
a
or
fake
fake.
or
They
real
could be real or
profile,
fake,
and the majority of them are fake profiles, and you're trying to like convince these people like you're catfishing each other essentially.
It's a popularity contest. Yeah.
So it's a popular
on Netflix.
Between the actual you or the fake you that you can create.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
This is our world.
I mean, it is, and it's crazy, and it's hard to. What would you say? Maybe are the motivations behind? If you had to guess, like what drives somebody? Because I think we have to have empathy towards like a person that's like maybe broken enough. Like we're all broken, but broken enough to do something like that. Like they probably have their own emotional baggage or pain points in their life that are just driving them for security, driving them for supremacy, authority over somebody. You know, maybe it's narcissism, wanting to control. I guess, I don't know. Is this like something you see in the counseling world?
Trying to fill a need. So it's like I don't want somebody to, like if somebody saw what I really looked like, they wouldn't love me. Or I need money and this is like the best way that I can figure out to do this, or you hurt me and I want to hurt you back. I mean, I feel like there's some fueling of filling some kind of need for that person.
Yeah. And I'm always just trying to think like, how do we build empathy for not just the oppressed, but the oppressor? Because they're broken people too.
And Christ still died for them too, which is like, I'm not in touch with Kelsey anymore or anything. I think there was enough odd behavior that a clinical therapist, and when I'd filed the police report, basically were like, you need to cut off all ties. Because I did have a lot of empathy, and you know, she'd shared a lot of stories about her upbringing where when people would say things like, this girl is off, I would say things like, you don't know her. Like, man, she has been so hurt and so wronged, and I would defend her. But then when I got out of it all, I was like, were those stories even real? Like, I don't even know. And so, I think it is important to have empathy. And my therapist just told me, like, what keeps you safe in life? And I was like, oh, good Lord, I'm still trying to learn, y'all. And she said to me, it's standing in grace and truth. Like, you've got to stand in both. And in situations like that, I think we can swing really far towards grace of and I did that for so long, of just grace for her and her brokenness. But also the truth is like, this isn't okay.
Not okay at all.
Yeah. And so how do I I'll always say I still want to love you. And it's really powerful because I have forgiven her. And I realize that Christ did die for her too, and I want healing for her. And so I feel like I am loving her, but with boundaries, and that's like what you can do, finding wisdom in that and grace and truth. But people aren't born this way, right? They have to be taught. I'm like, somebody had to teach her. How do you just do that? Also, she moved to our town because she said they were buying a house and the house fell through. But I actually wonder, because she had so many stories about people from the town over, that one of my friends started dating one of the guys that Kelsey had said she had dated. And the guy was like, dude, I've never interacted with her. And she had all these stories. So I wonder if she did a similar thing in that town, moved to my town, did a similar thing, moved away. I don't know if she's doing anything now because I'm not in contact with her. But somebody still taught that.
Hurt people. Yeah. That's a Wendell Nelson.
Broken, broken love.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for being vulnerable and taking the time to share this story. And I don't think there's any question that this can definitely help people that hear it. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And that does it for this episode. If anybody has any questions or concerns, they can reach out to us on social media, if you have that sort of thing, at CCC Omaha, or you can send us an email to this podcast at cccomaha.org. And until next time, I'll talk to you then.